Toastmasters says that the best stories come from real life, and as such, history gives us a bounty of material from which to draw. For the last 18 months, Stacy has been helping a professional gambler turned human trafficker pen his story of smuggling undocumented illegal aliens across the San Diego border. This project has been challenging, given that the author is currently serving a 10-year sentence in a federal prison in Georgia. Even though his story begins over 30 years ago, his real journey did not take place until he started writing this book. It was well after the commencement of his incarceration. Today, Stacy will present the 5th speech in the storytelling manual, entitled Rediscovering Hope and Purpose. Her objectives today are to understand the purpose of stories about historical events or people, to use storytelling skills developed in the preceding projects to tell a story about a historical event or person. And her speech today is 7 to 9 minutes. So green at 7, yellow at 8, and 9 at red. Please welcome Stacy.
What if you were living in abject poverty and your average income was $2 a day, but just across the river or over the fence was advantage, opportunity, food, health care, and free education? Oh, and law officials that cater to minimal corruption. My question to you is this: would you risk everything to put your family and children on the right side of that fence? Of course you would. Anybody in their right mind would try. These are the words of David C. Taylor, a suburban middle-aged man who was too smart for his own good. David was a professional gambler who left that prestigious vocation to make an even bigger mark in the fine art of human trafficking. Over time, David became one of the biggest smugglers of illegal aliens across the California border. But a mere 20 years ago, David was kingpin of the cheesy Indian casino circuit in Southern California. He and his girlfriend had a system for the slots that never seemed to fail. It was a complicated formula that involved math, timing, observation, intuition, and least of all, luck. They were even banned from some casinos, but never arrested because no one could figure out how they were winning on slots when everyone knows slots is the one that has the best odds for the house and the worst odds for the player. But it's almost as if fate said, oh, no, you're not going to get away with this. One day, overnight, David lost all his money in a bank scam. Ironically, he was the scammy in a debit card swindle, which left him broke and the remainder of a little bit of his money all tied up in an FDIC investigation. But he had to make a buck, and as luck would have it, when he leaned on one of the colorful characters that owed him money, the poor sap cracked like a walnut and said, hey, I know a way that you can make 10 grand in one afternoon. I'm listening, he said. All David and his girlfriend had to do was meet a man at a particular house on the U.S. side of the California-Mexican border. There they would pick up anywhere from 5 to 20 illegal Mexican nationals and drive them up to a designated spot in Los Angeles. How he got there without getting caught was his problem. Well, ironically back then, and even now, it was easy for anyone to cross the border illegally to get into California, but to get beyond San Ysidro or Campo, that was a little tougher because you had to go through some very high-tech border checks on I-5 or I-15. But just like David figured out how to beat the odds in gambling, he also became a master at trumping border patrol. He justified his actions by telling himself he wasn't smuggling in drug dealers or murderers or whores or people who were taking our precious white-collar jobs and IBM office geeks. It's true, first he did it for the money, but then he realized he was reuniting families and getting them out of situations in which if they stayed, it was surely would be death. Would you risk everything to put your family and children on the right side of that fence? Of course you would. Anyone in their right mind would try. Unlike gambling, smuggling moms and pregnant young wives across the border to be with their families gave David a sense of purpose he never had before. Even though he was breaking the law, he felt like he was doing something good. But a house of cards has a way of betraying a hope and purpose when it comes tumbling down. David eventually slipped up and got caught. And since he refused to give up the names in the operation, he fell on his sword thinking, oh, I'm just going to get a year or two. And in reality, he got a 10-year sentence in a federal prison. Today he's only on year 3 in that sentence, and that feeling of hope and purpose quickly faded. That's where I came in. David's mom contacted me and asked if I would help him write the story while he was still in prison. I was reluctant, not because he was a convict. That part actually intrigued me. I thought that was interesting. No, it was because I was worried about, I had my own recent life setbacks and derailments that caused me to lose my own sense of hope and purpose. And I was afraid that my cynicism would douse that little spark that compelled him to write. At that time, I could barely drag myself out of bed and be creative, let alone convince a convicted, incarcerated man that he could do it. But just like when David decided to smuggle humans, I needed the money. So I decided to go for it. My decision at the time was no more altruistic than that. I needed the money. I've been working with David for 18 months now in a laborious process that involves the feds reading everything that goes back and forth in snail mail between us. I've only talked to him once on the phone for 15 minutes on a monitored call, and we don't email. His book, The Hakumba Connection, is very near publication. And now there's even talk of a movie being adapted from this book, since he was one of the biggest smugglers of people. Not long ago, out of the blue, I received this letter from David. This is how his manuscript was, except it was on napkins and little pieces of paper when I first got it. To his surprise and mine, his story became secondary to a bigger picture. David writes, when I write, it's at a round table in the TV room. It seats 5 with my stuff, dictionary, pens, manuscript, etc. Takes up 3 spaces. Little Mo, straight up gangster but a good kid, Little Mo Pimp strolls over to my table and says, "Yo, OG," which stands for Old Gangster. "Every time I roll up on you just be scribbling and scribbling. I gotta ask, though, why?" My answer, because, Little Mo, I can fly. And inside that statement is the magic, the gift. You see, when I'm writing, I'm on the other side of the razor ribbon with you guys in the free world, working on our story, learning from you guys how to fly. The gift you've given me is hope and purpose. Prison will eat your soul and spit out the gristle, but not if you have hope and purpose. And in that moment, my fear seemed ridiculous. And I realized sometimes courage does not mean slaying a big, scary, fire-breathing dragon, but rather taking one step forward in a direction that does not make any sense. Yet somehow it does. I've not written back to David yet, but I will. Because in the end, hope and purpose is a two-way street.